Trials, the worst kept secret in Destiny 2 over the past 3 months, is finally returning to Destiny. With it will come 3 maps from Destiny 1, the Cauldron, Exodus Blue, and the Anomaly, all pretty well-liked maps, all things considered. I was waiting until the This Week at Bungie update that was posted on the 27th, because I was anticipating more news on Trials itself, but we didn't really get much, except for one major thing, which we'll talk about. If you're unfamiliar with Trials, here's how it worked. It uses the Elimination Game Mode 3v3 format. You picked up a ticket that had slots for 9 wins and 3 losses. If you win, you get a green mark, and if you lose, you get a red mark. Once you hit 9 wins or 3 losses, your card was done, and you would get some loot based on how well you did. If you went 9-0, you got to go to the Lighthouse for some bonus loot. It was a very well-received game mode back in D1, and it looks like it's just sort of coming back. Oh, and it was power-enabled, which brings us to our main topic. As I was writing this video, Bungie switched their stance on artifact power levels. Originally, the power you gained from your artifact was going to be active in Trials. This was met with nearly universal hatred, as people did not want to lose simply because they were out-leveled. I imagine it also has to do with the fact that the way we gain XP right now is heavily weighted towards spamming repeatable bounties on the moon, and that losing to people simply because they grinded bounties for hours and hours and hours doesn't feel great. So, very shortly after announcing that power from the artifact would be enabled, it was then announced that it would no longer be enabled, although artifact mods would remain enabled for Trials. I think this is a good move, and here's why. I think power mattering in PvP for Destiny should probably just not really be a thing anymore. In a typical MMO, you have different gameplay, class balance, different genre of game, that it makes sense that gear advantages are enabled. If Bungie wants the game to play like an FPS with such strict FPS values, then they should probably just keep power out of PvP. I get that you want to reward people who actively play the game as well, and you want to incentivize leveling and all that, but it's always going to be met with hostility because you're now turning a skill-based game or mode of a game into who can outlevel the other team. You turn it into a game of who has more playtime. Now look, I'm all for rewarding people who play the game a lot. If you put in the time, you should be rewarded. If you do the hardest stuff in the game, you should have better items than people who don't do as difficult content, as I may or may not rant about in a future video. I'm a big proponent of that. But for PvP purposes, it'll never sit well with the community. It just will not. There are other things that also don't sit well with the community that I'm more willing to argue for. This is not one of those things. I think the only people in favor of this were people who planned on grinding lost sectors nonstop to level up, or who are power levelers. And I think it's safe to say that no one wants to lose to people who are stronger because they grinded lost sectors. I think people don't feel as bad losing to people who outlevel them because they're a raid lord or some PvP lord. If leveling felt more skill-based, or if like moon lost sector grinding wasn't the best way to level up, then maybe this sentiment would change. However, this change does incentivize pinnacle loot again, for what that's worth. So, with that out of the way, let's talk more nerfs. Yeah. Okay, now before you go nuts, hang on. These are good to neutral level nerfs. Most of them revolve around one-hit kill abilities on all classes. The first one we'll cover is Handheld Supernova. Handheld Supernova is the bane of people's PvP existence nowadays. It and Controverse Hold are getting adjustments. Activation time was increased by 0.6 seconds. Hold time was reduced to 2.5 seconds. It used to be 3.5. The range was reduced by 20%. The horizontal spread of bolts was tightened by 25%. The bolt explosions deal self-damage now, and the bolt explosion radius was reduced half of a meter. It used to be 3, now it's 2.5. This sounds brutal, but Handheld Supernova, I believe, is still probably going to be a pretty good ability. It just won't have that instant win factor that it feels like it has right now. The spread is tightened, meaning you will need to aim it a little bit better, but it still has some pretty good range on it. 12, 13 meters is still really far away. You can't hold it as long either, so no just walking around with it, not as much anyway. Controverse hold is also getting adjusted, but we don't know how just yet. But since Nova Warp appears to be underperforming right now, it's sort of I think it's just below average, it will be getting buffed. Increased damage resistance, longer duration, and a reduced blink cost. Let's just hope it doesn't turn back into what it used to be a while back, because those are some scary looking buffs and might make it so that Middle Tree Voidwalker is still one of the go-tos for PvP. I'm very happy about this change on paper. It looks like they obliterated the ability, but I don't think they did. I just think they made it reasonable. It will hopefully no longer just be an instant win button, but considering most people combine it with Controverse, things are up in the air until we know what happens to Controverse. But yeah, overall, anything that reduces the power of this ability, I'm all for. It's been dominant for too long, and much like Nova Warp was, if they just crashed this ability into the ground for a little while, if these nerfs are as bad as they might seem on paper, I'm not going to shed a tear. Next, Hunter Throwing Knife. It's a one-shot now, at least on the bottom tree, and it has insane tracking on it. The tracking has been reduced. New tech was made to make the knife more faithful to its initial throw trajectory. Yeah, I'm pretty okay with this one as well. Seems like the hit detection was pretty liberal, so yeah, this is fine. Next up, Titan Shoulder Charge. The tracking on Shoulder Charge is pretty nuts, allowing you to hit 90-degree shoulder charges pretty easily without too much effort. The auto-targeting angle has been reduced by 50% so that you actually need to aim your shoulder charge a little bit more to lock on. Also, lunge distance differed depending on if you locked onto a target, 6 meters, compared to if you didn't, 4.5 meters. Both will now lunge 5.5 meters. I was wondering how long Titans were going to be able to get away with this, and it looks like the time's up. The jig is up, y'all. It's time to aim shoulder charges just a little bit more again. This one is fine. I think Titans are going to feel this one more than the victims of shoulder charge will feel it. Sometimes it's kind of tough to see what kind of an angle a Titan charges at you. As a Titan, this kind of sucks, but it's definitely reasonable. Next up, some more interesting notes. Warlock Melee. It's slower than other melees, meaning it's harder to win punch fights in PvP, or even trade sometimes. Well, instead of giving Warlocks the same melee speed as Titan and Hunter, they're getting their melee range extended by 1 meter. This was done to bring some difference in how all of the classes operate. They didn't just want all of the classes to have the same melee interactions. But they're going to track the data and see if it's balanced to maybe see if they should just turn the melee into what Titans and Hunters have. This one's interesting. I respect that they're trying to make the classes feel different compared to one another. I think people would have ultimately preferred if they just made the Warlock Melee the same speed, but I'm interested to see how this one ends up playing out. Increased melee range is a nice effect to have baseline. For PvE purposes, it doesn't really help out that much though, and I think Warlocks want to be able to do 2 punches easily with 1-2 punch shotguns like Titans and Hunters can. Although, let's be honest, 1-2 punch should probably just be charge based and not really duration based. I'm getting off track. Next up is Titan Barricade. It is getting a health increase from 500 to 600 HP. It's a 20% buff. But snipers, grenade launchers, linear fusions, machine guns, trace rifles, and anti-barrier weapons will deal 30% bonus damage to walls, and shotguns and fusions will deal 60% bonus damage to walls. Titan Barricade will prove to be an issue in trials. Popping a wall to res people is pretty strong, and a 500 HP shield is tough to shred down from far away. giving Titans a pretty big advantage there. In the coming patch, you'll now be able to somewhat counter this advantage by spending that green or purple ammo. It's the ammo. You'll get yellow numbers to pop up when you deal damage with a gun that gets bonus damage against a wall. I think the HP buff is going to be pretty helpful. I don't know how much people are going to be willing to spend their special ammo if they don't have a lot of it in trials just to try to kill a wall. The only primary that's really capable of killing a wall quickly is Cerberus, and I don't imagine a ton of people are going to be running that in trials. But if you do manage to kill the wall, then the Titan is usually left pretty vulnerable as a result. I could see Titans stacking resilience to get fast walls, especially in trials, to try to counter this nerf buff sort of deal. Gonna need to see how this one plays out, but I respect the proactive nature of this move. Finally, some subclasses as a whole are getting buffed and nerfed to try to make things a little more equal in PvE and PvP. For example, Stormcaller top, Striker bottom, and Arcstrider bottom have remained dominant in PvP, highest win rates, and average efficiency. Even in PvE, ranked highest in kills per minute. Thus, these will be getting some various currently unknown nerfs. On the opposite side, Voidwalker bottom, Nightstalker bottom, and Striker middle will be getting some buffs to bring them closer to center. I would definitely like to see some data on these. I believe Bungie, I don't think they're lying or anything, but just as someone who is curious to see numbers, gimme that. Bungie then goes on to discuss why they don't just buff up everything to the level of the best stuff in the game in order to balance the game. And that's because they don't want power creep in their game, which would trivialize the difficulty of the game. Something that I have been trying to explain for years now. Oh, also, Hunter trip mine grenades will be able to stick people again, which at this point is a welcome change back to trip mine grenades. That's it. That's all I got on the recent trials news and buffs and nerfs and all that. I think overall pretty good news considering how people have been receiving the weapon retirement news. Still thinking of making another video on weapon retirement, but we'll see if that happens. Not sure if I'm really going to be willing to endure getting into that much trouble. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.